If you feel that you're not progressing on the instrument, there is one single reason. And it's not what you think. It has nothing to do with technique. It has nothing to do with your comprehension of music. And it has nothing to do with the amount of time you spend on the instrument. The biggest problem guitar players face is that they don't know how to practice. And it's not your fault. This is not something that is taught. Nobody teaches how to practice. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can design the perfect practice session, ensuring that you advance anytime you pick up the guitar. Let's get started. Hi, my name is David. Welcome to this channel, which is all about helping you express yourself on the guitar. Together, we're going to design a practice plan. I'm going to show you one of my actual practice plans that I'm working on. And if you follow along, by the end of this video, you'll be able to design your own practice plan. You will know what to do, and I promise that you will advance and get unstuck of whatever musical situation you are in. There are three essential components that I talked about in the previous video. These components are starting with a question, and we're going to do that together. Also, having something to write on, not just your computer, but actually write something. And then finally, make sure that when you're practicing, you're not copying exactly what you are reading about or watching or whatever you're studying. You need to have some creativity in there. Okay, let's get started. The first component is the question, and that's going to direct the different things we're going to practice with. So a question could be anything. My question is really a problem. I want to stop playing the same exact pentatonic scale licks over and over when I have to jam. That's what I rely on all the time, so I want to escape that. So my question is, how can I escape the minor pentatonic scale? Now there's another question you need to ask yourself. There are really three types of practice sessions you can create. There is the theory-driven practice plan, the technique-driven practice plan, and the creativity-driven practice plan. The only difference between these is the amount of time you're going to spend on the topic of your practice plan. So a theory-driven practice plan will have more theory, technique, more technique, and creativity, more creativity. I'm going to go with the theory route because I think that if I can understand my fretboard a little bit better, if I can understand my options, I'll be able to escape the pentatonic scale. You could have designed a technique or a creativity practice plan for that, but that's what I'm going to do. Now, there is a formula for each of these different practice plans that I've refined over the years, and that seems to work very, very well. It's worked for all of my students, and I think it's going to help you as well. This formula has to do with the amount of blocks you're going to have in your practice plan. Each of these blocks are equal blocks of time to which you're going to focus on one of the three main areas of focus: theory, technique, and creativity. The formula that I came up with has 6 equal blocks of time. So let's say you have an hour to practice. Each of these blocks of time is going to be 10 minutes. If you have 30 minutes, 5 minutes. It can scale down or up very easily, and you have 6 different blocks of time. The 6th block is always going to be a creativity block. Creativity means that you are just playing, being musical, trying to focus on some elements that have to do with your practice, but you're still kind of like testing things out, being creative. Maybe you're playing over a backing track, or maybe you are writing a song. Just use your creative brain. So the practice session should always end with a little bit of creativity. Then you're going to think of the main area of focus of your practice. So here I'm designing a theory practice plan. Therefore, blocks 1, 3, and 5 are going to be a theory block. If I went the technique route, then I would have blocks 1, 3, and 5 for technique. Creativity, 1, 3, 5, creativity. That leaves us with blocks 2 and 3, and those blocks are going to be with the 2 other elements that you are not really focusing on. So here I have my theory-focused practice plan. That means that blocks 2 and 4 are going to be dedicated to technique and creativity. All right, so now I know how my blocks are going to be filled. I need to know what I'm going to do during these time slots. Since my first block is a theory block, I'm going to dedicate those first 10 minutes mapping out the chords, the arpeggios of the chords of the chord progression I'm going to use during my practice. Here I'm going to use a blues, a typical blues in A, so 3 chords, A7, D7, E7, and I'm going to spend the first 10 minutes with my pen and paper mapping out these things on the fretboard. And it's really important that you do that physically on paper. The reason we're doing this with pen and paper is that the active act of writing something down will make some connections between your brain, your understanding, and later on with your fingers. Visually, it's really going to help you if you actually do the work because you're going to have to think through all that. So that's my first time. Now, why did I decide to do that with these chords? The reason behind that is that since my practice plan is really built so that I can solve that problem of always playing in the same box of the pentatonic scale, my theory is that, well, maybe if I incorporate to my minor pentatonic scale the chords, if I focus on the chords, maybe it'll help me escape a little bit more. That's just a theory that we're going to test. So that's why I decided to spend my first 10 minutes with that. My second block of time is a technique block of time. That's 10 minutes in which I'm going to work on technique. Now, technique doesn't necessarily mean that you're working on a very challenging lick over and over, or it doesn't necessarily mean that you're working on alternate picking exercises. It can, but since I'm designing my practice trying to escape the pentatonic scale, I need to design that time of technique to solve that goal. And here, one of the ways that I can reach that goal is to actually memorize, get under my fingers, the positions that I mapped out in the previous section. So that's where I'm going to spend time memorizing the arpeggios. I'm going to use 10 minutes to memorize and play these arpeggios on the fretboard. Now, I can add a little bit of creativity. I don't have to play it exactly the way it is. I don't have to use a backing track, but I'm just embedding into my fingers what we spend time working on. Block 3 is another theory block, and what I'm going to do here is map out, again, with pen and paper on the full fretboard, the minor pentatonic scale that I'm trying to escape. Because my theory is that if I can visualize my minor pentatonic scale on the fretboard and map it out, I might be able to see some escape routes. I don't know. We'll see. Again, the active act of writing something on paper is very beneficial. It's really going to help you see some connections. So that's what I'm going to spend my next 10 minutes on. Then I'm going to have my first creativity block. In this time, I'm going to use a backing track. So if I'm using a backing track in A, blues in A, traditional 3 chords, I'm just going to jam over that, trying to implement some of the things some of the theories that I'm looking at in my practice and seeing what comes out, being creative with that. So in this case, I'm going to try to blend the minor pentatonic scale that I'm trying to escape. Remember, I'm trying to escape it, not necessarily forget it, with some of the arpeggios of the chords that I mapped out in that first block of theory. So that's how I'm going to spend my time, my 10 minutes here, jamming over this, being musical with the concepts that I worked on in the previous sections. So that's for my 4th block. Then I have a 5th block. In this case, it's a theory block because I'm dedicating my practice I'm focusing my practice more towards theory. And in that block, what I'm going to do here is try to add another element of escape. Another theory could be here that maybe if I blend some major pentatonic scales to everything else, I'll be able to escape that minor pentatonic scale. Maybe. How could you come up with that theory? Well, maybe you read somewhere or saw in a video that a good choice for major chords, to play over major chords, is to use major scales. You can match major chords with major scales, minor chords, minor scales. So why not come up with some kind of major scale that would work over the 3 major chords of our blues? And in this case, I'm going to do the major pentatonic scale, maybe. That's one area that I want to work on. So I'm going to map out on my fretboard the positions of A major pentatonic, D major pentatonic, and E major pentatonic. And that's going to be my area of focus. If you don't know how to do that, if that's what you have, That's okay. Tweak it a little bit. You can scale it down or scale it up depending on the things that you've acquired in your playing. So maybe you don't know how to do that. Well, that's okay. Spend a few minutes of your theory time, maybe doing some research online. Just Google a formula for the major pentatonic scale and you'll see it, and try to understand it and try to start mapping it out. You don't have to finish everything in 10 minutes, but you'll spend 10 minutes working on that thing. The next time you practice, tomorrow, the next day, whatever, it's going to be a little bit faster. But you will spend at least 10 minutes here working on that particular concept, if that's what you wrote down in your practice session. And then finally, we have a sixth block, and every practice session should end with a creativity block of time. So here I'm going to use 10 minutes of my time to just be musical. That's the only goal. Be musical and try to bring out some of the things that are discovered in the previous blocks of time. So here, during my 10-minute time of creativity, I'm going to try to blend the minor pentatonic scale with the arpeggio notes of the chords, making sure that I'm playing those notes when the chord happens with the major pentatonic scales that I mapped out in the previous session. And because I broke this down into a very strategic way, I touched on the three main aspects of music: theory, technique, and creativity. And that's how I create my practice plans. That's how my students do it, and I think that's how you should do it. This will really help you get unstuck. It might seem a little scholar, a little bit, oh, that's too much. It's not. I promise the progress you're going to make by planning in advance your practice sessions is really going to help you. In the description of this video, there is a link that will allow you to download some free templates for these practice plans. Just give me your best email address and I'll be sending you these right away. And if you want to stick around for another video, learning how to really express yourself on the guitar with simple strategies to put in place, click right here. I'll meet you there. Thanks for watching. Practice well.